Story 1. Honestly, the speed at which technology is advancing while laws and ethics lag behind is alarming. It feels like we are sprinting into the future with no brakes, which is rather terrifying when you think about it. Story 2. Data is being collected and used against us, and people keep feeding it more data. The best way to win is not to play. Story 3. Political beliefs are becoming more polarized, and political violence is increasing with growing public support for it. I think content algorithms lead people into extremist rabbit holes without their awareness. They believe they are seeing unbiased news. Story 4. The wealth gap is growing. Many people can barely feed their families while a few are accumulating enormous wealth. This is a problem of greed-driven inflation within capitalism. Story 5. The mental state of young people is deteriorating. They are constantly plugged into never-ending streams of propaganda and unrealistic caricatures of life. They heavily rely on technology and are losing the ability to think critically. Story 6. For me, it's how quickly food prices keep rising. Feels normal day to day, but when I think about it long-term, it's terrifying. What's yours? Story 7. A collection of sociopaths is trying to push us into a situation where they can control access to information, culture, products, communication, mediums of self-expression, and even housing, so they can entirely circumvent democracy by making access to those things contingent on their revocable permission. Money is useless to someone like Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg if people they dislike still have the right to exist and to do things they disagree with. No amount of lobbying can stop people from thinking you are a twat, but you can control public sentiment if people lack the independence to own and do things. Their techno-sharecropping situation is basically a morality clause applied to all of daily life. Story 8. Artificial intelligence is being implemented without consideration of the consequences for humans, the individual and collective psyche, and society. This is the same mistake we made with the internet and with algorithm-driven social media. We think we are so fucking smart as a species, but that is a completely subjective opinion. When we invent something that looks impressive at face value, we start using it without thinking about unforeseen consequences. Look at where that has taken us. Story 9. People are increasingly depending on artificial intelligence. Skechers was called out for using artificial intelligence in ads placed in the New York subway. Guess used artificial intelligence models in Vogue, a fashion magazine. Tech companies are announcing almost daily that they are firing staff so artificial intelligence can do their jobs. Marvel has been criticized for using artificial intelligence in its shows and comics. Ordinary people use artificial intelligence to write reports, homework, and even text messages. And some believe they are creating art simply by prompting a program to generate content. We are losing our creativity and art. Story 10. Climate change is now a present-day issue rather than a far-off one. The Earth seems to be screaming at us during every heat wave, flood, and wildfire, but we continue to press the snooze button. Story 11. Hatred between men and women. Political polarization is fueled by social media. There is a growing desensitization to suffering and violence. Story 12. Young people's main sources of news, politics, and current events are social media. I see many young people today who are unable to think critically about political situations because they follow or subscribe only to people and pages within their own political circle. They are trapped in echo chambers and do not realize it. This becomes evident in classroom discussions. A few weeks ago, during introductions in my new class, one student spoke about the situation in Gaza using phrases I had heard online. It felt as if he had copied a few posts he had seen. That is the case with many young people on both sides of the issue. They are simply repeating words they encounter on social media. Story 13. Surveillance keeps growing, mapping nearly everything people do. The European Union has a proposal named Chat Control that would scan encrypted chat applications, email, and other messages automatically for suspicious content. The stated reason is to protect children from sexual abuse. This is unacceptable. This is not the way to protect them. This system will be used for other purposes. Mark my words. Story 14. Aggressive use of artificial intelligence, if not controlled now, can be frightening in the future. Story 15. Antibiotic resistance. Stop treating your drip with aquarium drugs. Story 16. Artificial intelligence raises the question of how we will know what is true and what is fake when it can look so real. Some people will not be able to distinguish truth from falsehood, which could spark conflicts and other social problems. Consider platforms such as Reddit and YouTube, where arguing with artificial intelligence about social issues, games, or hobbies could lead nowhere because the responses are generated rather than human. Even online dating could be manipulated by trolls. You might think you are talking to a person when it is actually bots being run by a scammer to obtain your information or money. There are many benefits to artificial intelligence, but it can also get out of our hands if we are not careful. Story 17. I'm really worried about growing Chinese aggressiveness, as seen in clashes in the South China Sea. Specifically, I am concerned about a Chinese blockade or invasion of Taiwan. I estimate a 25% chance of this occurring over the next decade. If that happens, I estimate a 50% chance that the United States and its allies would be in a major war with China, with a significant risk that the conflict could escalate to nuclear war. Story 18. Empathy epidemic. We are killing each other with no remorse. We say things to one another without thinking. Some people want others dead simply for existing. I am terrified. Story 19. The prevalence of artificial intelligence is causing students to rely on it instead of developing critical thinking and research skills. Story 20. With unrest worldwide, I wonder if the world is getting ready for World War III. Story 21. The looming threat of another world war. By the time it begins properly, my son will be old enough. None of this is his concern, yet it constantly weighs on my mind. I value every moment with him and understand that time is precious. Story 22. The insect apocalypse. We must sound the alarm because insects are essential to our survival. Story 23. The tech monopoly controlling the United States economy is troubling. Considering they are now getting into policing as well, it is going to be a company town soon. Story 24. This might sound woo-woo, but the devaluation of art and entertainment is difficult for me. It may not be productivity in the sense of earning money for the time and effort, but art and entertainment improve our quality of life significantly. Creating art is a very human and, I dare say, spiritual activity. Handing it off to artificial intelligence makes us weaker in almost every way. Reducing it to streamed content that pays creators little or nothing was a step in the wrong direction. It is hurting jobs, reducing the quality of art and music, and taking a part of our humanity away. In short, if productivity is how we live, art reminds us why it is good to be alive. Story 25. Trump is putting yes men in positions of power, and their willingness to lie to further their own agenda is more like George Orwell's 1984 than anything I have seen in America. Story 26. Evil people in power are using technology and brainwashed rubes to push fascism. Story 27. More and more countries are beginning to report population decline. I can hear you all now. What? Isn't that a good thing? There are already too many people. I agree, but my concern is that in countries with social safety nets, those systems are funded by the younger generation with the promise that the same systems will support them in old age. That premise assumes population growth, or at least a stable population. If the population declines and funding methods do not change, the system will collapse. So what is the answer? That is the wrong question. Will those in power act before it is too late? Call me a pessimist, but I truly believe enough people exist who simply do not care about the next generation and will actively oppose measures to help them. Story 28. The ongoing suffering of civilians in Gaza scares me for the future of humanity. It is heartbreaking that such loss of life continues while the world struggles to act. Story 29. The world has been on the brink of destruction since nuclear weapons became accessible to many countries. Our only hope has been that an unstable leader will not decide to destroy the planet, especially if they are dying or losing power. Oh wait. Story 30. Food adulteration genuinely scares me because it quietly poisons the very thing we all rely on every day. Story 31. There is a sudden push for digital identification, mandated facial recognition, and associated censorship. Story 32. In the United States, 1. Food prices have not fallen and are rising again, caused by widespread crop losses. 2. An anti-vaccination conspiracy theorist is in charge of public health. This is similar to the Salem witch trials. 3. Many deny they are being robbed by unfair taxation without representation. Only the top 1% receive tax breaks. Most others experience higher effective tax rates. Story 33. The development of artificial intelligence is so rapid that I do not want to know what it will be like in the future. Story 34. There is a complete lack of opposition to nationalist politics in the United Kingdom. The three biggest parties are mainly arguing over who will punish minorities and vulnerable people the most. Opposing this is becoming a fringe extremist position. Story 35. A high percentage of Project 2025 goals have been completed, with 3 years remaining. Story 36. The decline toward irrelevance of the United States of America, replacing its democracy with fascism and its world leadership with insular, deep incompetence is horrific. They have an anti-vaccination advocate in charge of health, a toady in charge of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, a sociopath in charge of United States Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Christo-fascist, majorities with life tenure on the highest courts, and serial liars in many major positions. A far-right activist was killed by another far-right assassin, and they are blaming the left. The last election was almost certainly fixed, and they are working hard to remove any fairness from the next one. It will either end in civil war or the death of the nation as we know it. Story 37. I feel like the end of the world is coming in this lifetime. Story 38. Fewer people seem to take pride in genuine curiosity. Many accept things at face value. Fewer want to make things with their hands, discover something on their own, or truly talk something through. This is evident in schools through shortened attention spans and online and viral, incendiary emotional reactions to major events. No single generation is more at fault than another. I want to stay positive and assume most people are not like this, but even a small group of loud people acting this way can influence the world. Story 39. Russia has started sending drones into Poland, a member of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Story 40. The job market is worsening daily. It is only a matter of time before people panic and the economy crashes, especially with rising inflation. Global warming is another major concern. Story 41. One job is not enough. My 6 friends and I, a group of 7, each work 2 or 3 jobs. Most of us work 3. We have degrees. Only one of us has a child. Most of us are single with no family and still need 3 jobs to pay for a studio apartment, food, and bills. We are overworked and burned out. Nothing seems to be getting better. In fact, it is getting worse. We used to go out. Now we meet at each other's houses because we cannot afford to go out. That, along with right-wing policies and the current administration, makes things worse. Story 42. The vitriol directed at transgender people is terrifying. Having your existence treated as inherently political is frightening. Story 43. The Trump administration is calling the contraceptive pill and intrauterine devices abortifacients. It is not hard to see where this is going. It makes me want to have children even less, to be honest. Story 44. Anyone who has studied statistics knows that 6 standard deviations above the mean represents an enormous deviation for ocean warming in the Pacific. Humanity is in for a wild ride. Story 45. Environmental issues are paramount. None of the other concerns matter if the Earth becomes uninhabitable. Story 46. The lack of hands-on practical skills in the younger generation. Story 47. Every time a tragedy happens, people are quicker to blame transgender people. This blame persists. It is venomous and vile. It leaves me wondering how many times we can do this before it blows up in people's faces. And when it does, how far will it go? How many people, transgender and not, will get hurt before it blows over? Story 48. It is alarming how eager people are to allow harm to happen if it means certain groups are hurt. In the United States, supporters of Make America Great Again ignore every warning sign unless it affects them directly and champion the loss of civil liberties because it lets them own the liberals or dehumanize people of color, transgender people, and lesbian, gay, bisexual, and queer people. For example, 317 South Koreans were treated inhumanely by immigration and customs enforcement and then deported. They had been in the United States legally to teach American workers how to operate the plant they built. Now the United States is being investigated for human rights violations, and 8,500 Americans are out of a job. Story 49. We are witnessing the destruction of American democracy. It is not an exaggeration to say we are barreling toward fascism at an alarming rate. This morning, Senator Rubio said that visas will be denied to people who speak poorly of Charlie Kirk or who celebrate his death. That is ideological policing and textbook fascism. Story 50. 1/4 of the world's population lives in conflict-affected areas, and the number is rising. Story 51. The fact that we are slowly moving toward a dictatorship. Story 52. I am from Europe, but the current situation in the United States of America terrifies me. Story 53. Volatility. Everything negative seems heightened. People are on edge. Political disagreements, rising costs, and too many differing opinions become white noise that drowns out legitimate discourse and casts an overall pall over the world. Even the nuclear war crisis of the 1960s does not measure up to the fear and uncertainty we are living through now. A sea change toward authoritarian rule and the resistance to it are moving us toward violent confrontations. Story 54. Our local police's newest class of recruits, reportedly the largest in years, visited the Holocaust Museum, where some were learning about the Holocaust for the first time. Story 55. Is there even a single multi-billion-dollar corporation out there that is not actively trying to change the world into a hellish dystopia for the ultra-elite? Story 56. How corporations are slowly destroying the world to maximize profits, resulting in severe global warming, increased social polarization, and the ever-increasing depletion of non-renewable resources. Story 57. Education in the United States. I believe everyone deserves a quality education regardless of their zip code, but the push for school vouchers while starving public schools of funding is moving in the wrong direction. In states that have used vouchers for several years, private school tuition has risen above voucher amounts. That means vouchers divert funds from public schools and force families to pay additional tuition. Families end up paying taxes for an underfunded public system while also paying for private schooling. Worse, private schooling is not necessarily better. Story 58. As an American, I am disturbed by the recent assassination of Charlie Kirk. I hated the guy, but political assassinations are historically bad omens. I have a feeling right now that United States politics will get worse before they get better. Story 59. There is currently a territorial dispute case at the International Court of Justice in which Guatemala claims a large portion of Belize, arguing it was historically theirs, and that the land was taken by the British, who claimed and repeatedly fought to defend it as their territory. If Guatemala wins this case, it could set a global precedent allowing nations to legally claim back territory they can demonstrate was stolen. This could include Mexico claiming lands taken by the United States in the Mexican-American War, Russia claiming Ukraine and other former Soviet Union territories, China claiming Taiwan, and similar claims across the Middle East and Africa. Story 60. Many regions are building data centers at high financial and social cost with little concern for downstream effects, such as continued strain on the electrical grid and siphoning freshwater for routine maintenance. Story 61. 1. Distrust of science and denial of climate change. 2. Erosion of critical thinking because of artificial intelligence. 3. Over-reliance on artificial intelligence, including ChatGPT, as a substitute friend, romantic partner, therapist, or sole source of truth. 4. The potential existence of a trillionaire who can buy influence in governments, fund elections, and rapidly harm millions of people. 5. The continued tendency for some men to view women as objects to be controlled, influenced by religion or by podcast personalities. Story 62. Massive toxicity results from the mixture of plastics and perfluoroalkyl and polyfluoroalkyl substances in the water cycle. Story 63. The power of willful stupidity. We have not lost our ability to think. We have gleefully handed it over to an echo chamber so full of confirmation bias that it has replaced the air. Our ability to reason is diminishing, and many of us do not care. People of all ages, not just kids in Generation Z, are refusing to think critically because it is easier to believe their own biases than to confront the possibility of being fooled or misinformed. Most people who engage in willful stupidity are not bad people. They are trying to do what they feel is right or to protect their loved ones. The problem is that when you fight for what you feel is right, you become nearly impervious to course correction and alternative suggestions, even if you are not handling the issue well. Feelings should not replace evidence and knowledge, but that is what is happening worldwide. You cannot reason with someone who believes their method is correct and least harmful when they did not use reason to reach that conclusion. Misinformation spreads 6 times faster on social media than accurate information. Content that confirms our beliefs is more emotionally satisfying and therefore more compelling. That sinks us deeper into quicksand and causes us to lose the ability to see the truth. Algorithms feed us rage content and exploit our emotions, and we complacently allow it. It is draining joy from our lives, and we justify staying by saying our friends will not leave. We are in an abusive relationship with social media companies that act like energy vampires. If our friends jump off a bridge, many of us will follow them. Ordering kiosks are mapping our facial structures and selling the data to unknown parties. No one fully knows the purpose or destination of this data, but it is likely not good for the average person. Social media companies maintain shadow profiles on people who have never used their services. Where is this data going, and why do we have no consent over its use? We do not get to pick where our data is sold or to whom. It often goes to the highest bidder. The 1% benefit when they force us to fight our neighbors, because if we are busy punching left and right, we will not notice that 99% is far greater than 1%. If the 99% decide to act upward instead of side to side, the 1% would be handled quickly. Finally, we all agree the world needs to be saved, but we cannot reach a consensus on how to do it. As a result, nothing gets done, and we continue to shout into the void. Story 64. Religions are not losing followers. On the contrary, their numbers are increasing and there are more fanatics. I fear humanity is sliding into another dark age ruled by religion. Story 65. We are not even making an attempt to stop climate change. Story 66. Lately, telling the truth is dangerous. Everything that should be normal is becoming offensive to some. Story 67. The complete lack of leadership in the United States regarding climate change and the resulting pandemics that it exacerbates. Story 68. There is too much reliance on technology. An entire generation and younger people do not know how to handle face-to-face social interaction. Story 69. Everything. The rise of modern fascism, climate change, rapidly rising social inequality, our eroding quality of life, and the threat of World War III looming over it all. Story 70. Everything? Not in an oh no the world is ending way. I am a really optimistic person. It is the best way to live, but there are just facts. We are in a society in decline, showing signs of a deep recession, if it is not already underway. Global warming is happening, and we still argue about whether it will occur. Capitalism no longer accelerates technological discovery. Instead, it accelerates an arms race toward tighter control. For the first time in 100 years, I do not think Americans believe in the American dream anymore. They either mourn it, as I do, or they lash out over its loss. In the words of our generation, we are cooked. Chat. Story 71. Education in the United States is failing. Apparently, the teacher's subreddit is terrifying. Students answer everything using artificial intelligence, even when asked for an opinion. Many are intoxicated on cannabis vapes during the day. We are talking about high school students who cannot write a paragraph or do basic addition and subtraction. Students are genuinely confused when they are told they cannot do something because it is inappropriate. Story 72. Prices are rising across the board, and annual wage increases are not keeping up. The wealthy are getting richer while poorer people fall further behind. Climate change and its effects on ecosystems are worsening. There are wars in many regions and incompetent governments. The list could go on. Story 73. Much of what is happening in the world right now is scary, but I cannot see how rising costs, especially for housing, healthcare, and food, outpacing wage growth year after year can be sustainable. At some point, we are all paying 40% of our salary for housing, 30% for healthcare, and 30% for food. What is left? Not to mention the cost of education, which has skyrocketed. Meanwhile, job benefits and job mobility are decreasing, making it more difficult to move to a better job, if one is even available. In my own job, a decade ago, we received multiple stock option packages, a 25% employer match on the 401k retirement plan, a 15% annual bonus, and a program where you could buy company stock every 6 months. There was a limit based on salary of about $2,500 each time. At the end of the 6 months, they either gave you your purchase cost plus 15% or the stock itself if it was higher, in other words, a guaranteed minimum 15% profit every 6 months. Now, at the same company, there are no stock options whatsoever, no program guaranteeing at least 15%, the 401k retirement plan employer match is down to 4%, and the 15% annual bonus still exists but is typically funded below the maximum level and sometimes not funded at all. They also switched us to flex time off, which they present as a benefit but means you do not accrue vacation time and do not receive a payout if you leave. It also makes taking time off more difficult because you need manager approval with an explanation for each request and approval from a vice president for more than 2 consecutive weeks off. And that is a good job. Many others are much worse. It has gone from working to thrive to working just to survive, and that is not even certain. Good luck battling the insurance companies when they deny your claims for any major medical problem. Story 74. Lack of privacy and extensive data collection combined with the ease of manipulation through social media. Declining education levels. An ever-increasing divide in wealth and power. Story 75. We will continue to compete with the ultra-wealthy for assets, and they will win. The middle class will disappear. The ultra-wealthy are buying up assets and driving inflation in housing, rents, food, and transportation across every market sector. Story 76. American politics and how politicians try to divide the American people. The level of misinformation, gaslighting, and lying shows that many corrupt government officials should be removed from office and prosecuted for their crimes. Story 77. Elon is funding fascist groups and preaching civil war. The ease of division and the inability to avoid repeating history. Story 78. I am turning 25 and feel uncertain whether putting effort into myself and my career is worthwhile because I fear a devastating world war and am unlikely to survive due to being medically fragile. Story 79. The war in Ukraine is worrying. I am from Poland, which borders Ukraine, and as Russia has been actively provoking the European Union, no one knows what will happen in the future. Story 80. Climate change, hands down. You can argue politics or technology all day, but when there is no clean water and food is scarce, everything else becomes pointless. Story 81. Everything. I am 17 and I genuinely do not think I will live to my mid-20s. I am scared. I am sorry you are feeling this way. Are you thinking about hurting yourself or planning to end your life? If you are in immediate danger, call your local emergency number now. If you are in the United States, you can call or text 988 or text home to 741,741 for crisis support. If you are elsewhere, contact local emergency services or a suicide prevention helpline, or search the International Association for Suicide Prevention to find local resources. Please consider telling a trusted person and seeking professional help. You do not have to face this alone. Story 82. The cost of everything has been rising rapidly since the coronavirus disease 2019 pandemic. The job market is struggling, and you cannot rely on employment and unemployment figures because they are often revised downward or manipulated. Tensions between people are high, with no resolution in sight, and it seems that everyone is only looking out for themselves. Many are stuck in algorithmic echo chambers and cannot see the forest for the trees. Story 83. It's shorts weather in mid-September. I am in the Arctic. Story 84. It is now taken as normal rather than fringe to lie, to know that you are lying, to know that others know that you are lying, yet to carry on as though that is acceptable. The obvious truth and the convenient lie are treated as having essentially equal value, even when everyone knows that they are lies. Story 85. Intelligence is declining worldwide. Coral bleaching is increasing. The oceans are acidifying. Carbon dioxide concentrations are increasing. Story 86. The increase in the use of artificial intelligence is slowly killing us, and no one is really acknowledging it. Story 87. Deep breath. The rise of authoritarianism in America, targeting marginalized groups, climate change, billionaires, racists, Russian expansion, the genocide in Palestine, idolizing propagandists and praising stupidity, tariffs, Nazis, gun violence, using the military to police, the streets, gerrymandering, masked men kidnapping people off the street, the House, the Senate, and the Supreme Court, whiny bitches who cannot handle a logo change, the death of due process and the First Amendment, Fox News, Christian nationalism, pedophiles, just a short list. Story 88. I think for me it is the lack of empathy and understanding online that life is not black and white. I began to notice this during the coronavirus pandemic when many people lost their jobs. Online, many comments suggested that people should just get a new job, as if people could easily leave their careers. There was little empathy for those struggling in a global crisis. When people complain about the cost of living, such as food, train fares, rent, and the expense of raising children, instead of bringing people together in compassion, the response is often that people brought it on themselves, that they should not have had children, or that they should move out of the city. Everyone's life is unique and complex, and things are rarely that simple. The lack of support seems to worsen as the internet grows. It is easy to make snap judgments based on a small part of someone's life. We need to bring back empathy and understanding for others. Story 89. The march of authoritarianism and the number of people who think it is a good thing. Story 90. I do not think gestures broadly at everything has ever been more applicable in my lifetime. Story 91. The United States of America is in steady decline into a fascist corporate dictatorship. It has more firepower than most of the world combined. If it decides to become the new Rome, it might be able to do so. But it will be built on the bodies of an awful lot of people. Story 92. There is a disconnect between humans and the environment in which we live. Humans are pursuing progress without regard for how it affects the world and the life around us. We are driving species to extinction and destroying ecosystems at an alarming rate, with no foresight into how this will affect the future. When we do realize, it will be too late for many species. Story 93. The rise of right-wing authoritarianism across many Western democracies. Story 94. As a Canadian, I see what is happening to my immediate neighbor to the south, how it is affecting us and the rest of the world, and I realize that it has not even been a full year since that dumbass orange pedo took charge of the country. Story 95. The country next to mine is rapidly embracing fascism, and the leader keeps talking about annexing us. Story 96. A complete lack of empathy for people who hold views different from your own. Story 97. All the newly developed technology for devices and software makes me look stupid in front of my son. Story 98. Idiocracy is actually happening in real life. Stupid people are dangerous and terrifying. Story 99. Charlie Kirk assassination. The world is very divided, and I expect more assassinations happening now. Story 100. The push for identification or face photographs on the internet is really bad. If a few of those websites suffer a data breach, that information would be available online for anyone to see. I do not trust most websites with my phone number, but sometimes it is necessary to provide it for certain services to work. There should not be an identification policy on any website or phone application that will certainly be used to target people for speaking in ways the powers that be or certain individuals do not like. I am also concerned about media censorship because my state might try to lock people up over anime and manga. I am anxious to see how that unfolds. Story 101. Trump presidency. The world's biggest moron is in charge of global policy and the best-equipped military. Story 102. Everything happening in the United States right now. That is why I want to dissociate and become oblivious to the point where I do not even know who governs my state anymore. I cannot do anything to stop any of this, so I want to just go on my merry way and live in ignorance until the world ends or I do, whichever comes first. The only thing I have gotten from being aware is poor mental health. Story 103. Children's education and how far behind it is compared to previous generations. I do not have children, but I hear that many cannot read or perform basic tasks, cannot tie their shoes, cannot write, and lack social skills. They struggle with constructive criticism and cannot use feedback to learn. You cannot be direct with these children. They often cannot manage basic personal hygiene, are not self-starters, and cannot take initiative or think for themselves. They must be told what to do. When faced with problems they must solve independently, they often have a breakdown and cannot proceed. Overall, the younger generation's skills have declined. It is frightening to consider how this will affect schools and what the world will look like when they come of age. Story 104. A global crisis is occurring. Hopelessness pervades the present and the future, controlled by a parasitic system that many are beginning to recognize. Distraction serves as a double weapon to evade this sick reality. We are more divided than before. Could this lead to accepting a world government in exchange for the parasite that strips us of our dignity? Would we need to replace corrupt human parasites with artificial intelligence? Story 105. The culture and identity wars are deliberately foisted on largely the West to divide and distract people. Victims believe they are on the right side and feel persecuted. While people bicker over meaningless distinctions between identities and cultural differences and grow poorer, the few who engineered these divisions are hoarding unimaginable wealth. Story 106. The grip that social media has on younger generations is troubling. The systematic destruction of various cultures and their sovereign identities could lead to serious problems if the world faces the next tyrannical empire and a leader like Hitler or Stalin. Story 107. Throughout my life, the future seemed like a happy, developed, peaceful place, but it no longer feels that way. Leaders inclined to war such as Vladimir Putin, Benjamin Netanyahu, and Donald Trump. Dominance of large technology companies and loss of privacy. Subscription-based capitalism. Degradation of online platforms. Resurgence of fascism. Artificial intelligence replacing jobs without compensation and reducing human interaction. Streaming services squeezing out artists and consumers. Story 108. A country is completely obliterating another country, supported by large corporations, technology companies, and social media, and nothing happens. They are doing it and no one can stop it. What will happen if Gaza is not enough? Story 109. Tensions are rising globally. I feel we are very close to another major war. All it would take is a single spark. A Russian jet shot down in North Atlantic Treaty Organization airspace, China launching an invasion of Taiwan, or the war in Ukraine spreading. It is only a matter of time before something truly terrible happens. Story 110. I could say artificial intelligence, especially when it starts replacing people. Story 111. Maybe the fascism happening in the United States of America is developing faster than it did in Germany in the 1930s. Story 112. It is genuinely difficult to get any kind of job, especially one that pays decently. Story 113. There are too many regulations. People do not care about statism. Story 114. Mass migration. The Ireland I grew up in has completely changed. Story 115. Artificial intelligence, unpredictable politics, unhealthy people, mentally disturbed adults, and warmth in relationships are the perfect recipe for a doomsday. Story 116. One more assassination and the gun nuts are going to lose their shit. Story 117. People cannot put their phones down while driving. What happens when we get smart lenses or eyewear and artificial intelligence companions to talk to? Story 118. Slow but steady erosion of personal freedoms is occurring. In the European Union, everything is becoming more regulated. The Danish Minister of Justice openly said he wants to break people of the expectation of basic privacy. This is not limited to the European Union. When combined with the business strategy of you will own nothing, and a population that is becoming less informed and more accepting, the result is a recipe for catastrophe. Due to climate change, Food and water will become very expensive in many regions. The wealth gap is widening, creating more poverty and even higher food prices. Meanwhile, governments worldwide are tightening surveillance to maintain control. Story 119. How did I not see anyone mention the war in Ukraine? Is no one afraid it will escalate into an even bigger conflict, especially now that Russian drivers have been shot down over Poland? Story 120. The apparent need people have to constantly insult and fight one another. Story 121. I feel like it would be easier to answer the opposite question here. What is happening in the world that does not make me genuinely scared for the future? My answer would be nothing. Story 122. The whole I identify as phenomenon is a mental illness plague. It is terrifying. Story 123. The apparent descent of the United States into totalitarianism, exacerbated by artificial intelligence. Story 124. There are too many to name. We have a so-called president who, I believe, believes his own lies. He and his whole regime believe their own bullshit. They will argue those lies as if they know, without a doubt, that they are stating the truth. We have people claiming Christianity who are not true Christians. They are giving true Christians a bad name. We have people praising their behavior as though they are saints. People are going broke just to eat. We are going to end up in a world where lies are truth, and the actual truth is illegal. This is not okay. None of what is happening right now is okay. They target people and communities that are just trying to live. That is what we are all trying to do. Live and survive. The media is constantly talking, but the words are so ridiculous you sit in disbelief because you know that half the population is going to believe what they say. What happened to rational thinking, common sense, truth, honor, morals, justice, love, and respect? Seriously, what the fuck happened? Story 125. People murdering other people as a legitimate political move. Story 126. Our president seems to be deliberately portraying everyone on the left as evil and presenting right-wing extremists as only wanting peace. I cannot fathom the state of this country right now. I hope most people do not buy into that rhetoric and that it is limited to terminally online people. Story 127. Make America Great Again and the Assault on American Democracy. I honestly do not believe we will have free and fair elections anymore. Story 128. Political discourse in the United States is getting worse every day. Story 129. The rise of political violence and those who celebrate it. Story 130. Aliens are finally visiting, and they only care about wireless internet. Story 131. Common sense is becoming non-existent as approval from technology is required before considering self-awareness and ideas. Story 132. Trump and all the people he listens to are calling transgender people terrorists and a death cult that must be eradicated. A young black man was lynched. He was bruised and had a broken leg, but the death was ruled a suicide. White supremacists are openly harassing and attacking people in public, and the police allow it to happen. I cannot own a gun. I cannot protect myself. Story 133. Today, a sitting United States Representative, Ronnie Jackson, said he will begin drafting legislation to arrest, institutionalize, and isolate transgender people. Considering that this is almost exactly how the Holocaust began with the burning of the Hirschfeld Institute, my response is that we are just living the reruns. Story 134. 1. People completely dismissing climate change, especially politicians and wealthy people who could act. For example, countries agreed to keep emissions low, but not a single country has come close to its goals, and the only consequence is paying money that is a pittance compared to their budgets. 2. Political corruption as the norm, allowing companies and wealthy interests free rein. Not only in the United States, Germany decided to sell underground water reserves to supermarket chains, and similar things happen everywhere. 3. Right-wing authoritarianism becoming a normal political stance, with right-wing extremist parties emerging and rapidly approaching the vote shares of established parties, while centrist parties sometimes cooperate with them. 4. Propaganda everywhere, media outlets, both social and traditional, owned and orchestrated by right-wing billionaires who use them to spread propaganda. In Germany, the Springer Media Group owns multiple outlets, And when the Green Party tried to improve life for ordinary people, those outlets launched a hate campaign that turned the party from fairly popular to widely blamed in a matter of weeks. 5. Independent outlets claiming neutrality instead of fact-checking. For example, a right-wing populist politician is allowed to claim that wind turbines reverse an important airstream in Europe without a short explanation that this is physically impossible because the airstream is several kilometers above the tallest turbines. 6. Social media influencers and podcasters spreading fear and hatred to children and teens, leading to radicalization. 7. Bot networks and artificial intelligence deliberately spreading fake news and making the internet borderline unusable. 8. War and humanitarian catastrophes everywhere. 9. A general regression of the victories toward equality made in the last century. 10. And more. At this point, the better question is what makes me confident about the future. The only things I can point to are Nepal and a few small-scale efforts. Story 135. The Reform Party is gaining traction in the United Kingdom. I genuinely don't want to live here if they win the next general election, but I don't have the means to relocate. Story 136. How many people are still turning a blind eye to what is happening to the Palestinians? We no longer have the excuse of not knowing when it is on our phones. If you can let this happen and not say a word, what else will you turn a blind eye to? Story 137. The way the United States looks more and more like Germany in the 1930s, thanks to that disgusting piece of crap your system elected. Story 138. I wake up and another right-wing grifter blames transgender people for all the world's problems. I am apparently responsible for all school shootings, Charlie Kirk's death, lower birth rates, domestic terrorism, low childhood literacy rates, hurricanes, coronavirus disease 2019, autism, and so on. Story 139. Christian conservatives are being unmasked as the people they really are because Trump and the Republicans have been a poor example of how to live in a democracy. Story 140. Normalization of hatred, bigotry, anti-science views, and neglect of public health. Story 141. They can elect rapists, felons, and pedophiles to office. Story 142. The rise of fascism in the United States. If it is this easy for the United States to become a dictatorship, what does that mean for the rest of the world? Story 143. One would think it is all the harm the Trump administration is doing, and while that is scary, that is not the worst part. It is that half the country is stupid enough to cheer for those actions. We're fucking doomed. Story 144. The genocide in Gaza and the resulting extremism around the world. Story 145. The rapid dehumanization of the political left and calls for their deaths. Story 146. People using Reddit to farm content for low-quality artificial intelligence-generated YouTube videos. Story 147. There are numerous Russian drones over the skies of Poland. I do not see many people talking about this, but to me this is how a world war could start. Story 148. China is buying farmland in Brazil for soybean production. This worries me for the Amazon. I recently completed a school assignment on deforestation in the Amazon caused by cattle ranching, and now soybean farms are expanding. The Amazon is severely threatened, and so are we. Additionally, the expansion of soybean farming is disrupting the United States economy and agriculture. Story 149. Something specific? Quite literally everything right now. Story 150. The overall polarization in American society is severe. I do not see how it can be reversed without some awful conflict or widespread tragedy. Story 151. Well, we are edging closer to World War III by the week. Inflation and housing are out of control. Artificial intelligence is also out of control. The climate is changing faster than we can keep up with. That is going to cause more immigration issues and the problems that come with them. The United States looks like it is on the verge of crisis, and no one knows what the consequences will be for the rest of us. The class gap has widened so much that many people are struggling to get by while a tiny percentage are becoming even richer. People are starting to hate each other, whether for political or religious reasons. Manchester United are performing very poorly. At least the new Battlefield game is coming out soon. Story 152. Any form of societal collapse or regression that would require a second industrial revolution to recover from would make it physically impossible for humanity to achieve a recovery. We have exhausted all of the coal, oil, and natural gas that can be accessed with human or animal power. We currently have only one opportunity to progress to an advanced civilization. Story 153. I do not believe the world as we know it has a future. I believe we are living in the end times as the Bible foretold. All the signs have been fulfilled. The most telling is the state of Israel and its significance in end times prophecy. I will not tell you my beliefs, but I encourage you to look and learn for yourself. We are living in a time like the days of Noah. What scares me most is that my loved ones will be eternally lost. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.